Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today I'm going to be bringing to you my Admiral Raddus breakdown for Star Wars Armada. I've been doing these commander breakdowns for a while, and generally I talk about which ships they work best on. In this case, this is not really going to be about where he works best on, but rather which ship Admiral Raddus works best to bring in, so which ship you don't want to put him on. Because Admiral Raddus is one of those guys, if you put him on the ship you want to use, he's going to be out of play, and it's a complete waste. So let's talk about Admiral Raddus here. He says, before deploying fleets, you may set aside one other friendly ship. At the start of any round, you may deploy that ship at distance 1 of a friendly ship. That ship cannot be deployed overlapping squadrons, and cannot be the first ship to activate that round. Very, very cool ship. Admiral Raddus came in the Profundity expansion pack. He was seen in Rogue One. Very, very cool guy. Everybody's favorite. Well, maybe second favorite. He might be a lot of people's favorite Mon Calamari. He was a cool dude. He got more, a little more face time than Akbar did, but I'll leave that to CGI. Admiral Raddus is great. And he's only 26 points, too. And the benefit he gives you is the ability to warp in a ship. Basically, they're arriving late to the battle, and it's the start of any ship, any round. So you can do this whenever you want. As a matter of fact, you can do this first round. Now, one question some people sometimes ask is, well, I can't warp in overlapping squadrons. Can I warp in overlapping an obstacle? And there's nothing to stop you from doing that. Absolutely, you can warp in overlapping an obstacle. There are certain, objectives that say ships can't be deployed overlapping obstacles. However, unless something specifically stops you from doing it, yeah, you can deploy overlapping an obstacle. And since that's not considered an actual move when you're deploying, you won't actually suffer the effects. So the idea, I think, from this perspective, and if that seems anti-thematic, just look at it from that space is in 3D, and from your perspective, you're warping in from top down, like behind the obstacle or something like that. Let's just say. But the thing is, let's talk about a couple of different things with Raddus. Also, speaking of big things, because you're going to use him for big ships. They have a huge giveaway going on right now. If you haven't already heard, you probably have. For a Super Star Destroyer, all you have to do to enter to win a Super Star Destroyer for Star Wars Armada in the form of a cool stuff gift card is to become a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. So, unlike my normal videos, I'm going to talk about which ships Admiral Raddus works best to bring in, and long story short, it's going to have to be a large ship. The Rebels get the biggest bang for their buck out of bringing in a large ship. If you're not going to bring in a large ship and you wanted to bring in maybe an assault frigate, maybe I could see that. There's some possibilities for that, but I don't generally recommend it. In that case, you'd probably be just better off, using a different commander and getting more of a benefit. And I definitely don't recommend bringing any of the small ships this way, because there's other ways to bring in small ships, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about, like his synergy with Profundity. So we're going to break down basically the 3 large ships and how you might work on bringing those in with Raddus. But also one of the things that makes Raddus kind of hard is if your opponent has a lot of squadrons, it can be very, very tricky to actually find the right spot to bring him in, because you can't, there are other effects that do allow you to, to warp in and displace squadrons, but not with Raddus. So that much can be tricky. It's also worth pointing out that if, for example, you still have your ship, you haven't warped your ship in, and you lose Raddus, well, then you don't get to warp that ship in. If you, for example, had only a 2-ship build, and you have Raddus on one ship and then the other ship off, that one ship gets blown up. Not only do you not get to warp the other ship in, you also lose because now you have no ships on the board. So, it's a little bit risky. So a lot of times when you're using Raddus, a lot of times people will run a bunch of small ships. Just this way you have, multiple ships on the board and also multiple points of entry for Raddus to warp in. So a Raddus fleet is going to like a lot of these smaller ships, specifically the flotillas. You can't put Raddus on a flotilla, but the flotillas are going to be good. CR90s, hammerheads, both are going to be good. Anything more expensive than that, then you're not going to be able to field as many. So I'm a big fan of CR90s and flotillas and hammerheads in a Raddus fleet, because you can have multiple ships on the board. You can spread them out so you have multiple points, because when you drop this ship in, it has to be range 1 of another ship. Not within range 1, though, because you wouldn't even be able to fit it within range 1, but at 1. So let's go ahead and distance 1 is small, right? It's you flip it over to the squadron side. So you do have a little bit of a bubble. Now, only one little piece of your big ship has to be within that bubble, so you have some flexibility on where you want to place it, but not that much. So the more ships you have, the more points, the more circles around your fleet that you have that you can warp a ship in. Now, depending on who you are facing, if they have a lot, like a Sloan list with a whole bunch of ties, they're probably going to spread those ties out all over the place, so you don't have a really great spot. So let's talk about some of... also, and it is also worth pointing out that while it says you can't be the first ship to activate this round, if, for example, there's no other ships that are available to activate due to some other type of effect, well, in that case, then you have no choice, and then that's the only other time you're actually allowed to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and I have him set up here on the assault frigate, but I don't really recommend using assault frigates. I'm going to start us off with the MC80. The MC80 Home 1 style. We've got 2 that could potentially work. Not generally the best option for Raddus, but certainly not bad. In that you can't necessarily go first, and I do like some, there's a version of this, though, that I do like. And let's say I might go with the MC80 Assault Cruiser, for example. It's certainly tough enough that you can drop it potentially right up next to another ship. In theory, the best place to do it, to drop an MC80, would be in between your opponent's ships so that you can get both broadsides out. Granted, that's ideally the dream situation to have Akbar as your commander, but you're so much less likely to get that scenario. A lot of times an MC80 with an Akbar fleet is on the outside, only shooting out of one arc. So if you're able to drop an MC80 in, and you can, depending on how your opponent's fleet is set up, maybe you can get him in between 2 different ships. Might be a really good idea to have, spinal armaments, enhanced armaments on there, increasing those broadsides. Definitely would suggest leading shots. Now, another thing, maybe enhanced armaments is a little overkill. You don't necessarily need to have that, especially if you're worried about points. And either one of these are going to work about the same way. But I would actually suggest that this might be a good time, if you're running Raddus and you want to set an MC80 aside, this might be a good time to bring in the Defiance. Because the fact that you can't activate first, here's a really cool title that is going to that is sometimes hard to use with such an expensive ship. Because when you're attacking a ship that's already activated this round, add a die of any color to your attack pool. So, granted, I love the title. It's not that expensive either, but it can be kind of hard to activate because if you have an MC80, you kind of don't have 7 or 8 ships, so it can be pretty hard to get this one to trigger. However, if you drop this right at the perfect spot, or maybe has double arc at close range on the enemy flagship, right? Well, now they're like, oh crap, I have to, because they're the first player, right? Or maybe they're not the first player, but they're going to be able to, if you're a first player, you can't activate this ship first. So they're still going to get a chance to move that ship out of the way first. Well, now they're incentivized to move that ship out of the way first and trigger Defiance for you. So even if they're able to get away to long range, you're still going to be able to roll, oh, well, let's go with a blue die. If they're out of medium range and you can't add your blue for leading shots, then add a blue with Defiance. And now you have a die that you can spend for leading shots to reroll all your reds. Great option there. And you can potentially do that for both shots with Defiance, which is really nice. Or if they're within blue range and you have the blue dice, then by all means add a black. You've got leading shots in case the black turns up blank. Just a great title that will really, I think, work with Raddus for either version of the MC80. So it doesn't matter as much there, although I kind of lean a little more towards the Assault Cruiser if you have the points. And if not, that's okay too. But they're both comparable to each other. They're both tough enough to survive. And anything else you want to bring on them, I don't even think you need as much. Like a lot of times you run MC80 with engine techs. I don't think you need to run engine techs here. You're going to drop him right in the middle of the fight. Hopefully. That's the idea. That's what you're kind of going for. So aside of the MC80, what else would we maybe want to run? Well, we have an MC80 Home 1 style, which is also, the MC80 Liberty style, which is going to be generally a little different here. Here's one you don't want to drop in the middle of the battle. because they are weak on the sides and on the rear. Here's one that you want to drop probably at a distance, which is going to be easier. And here's one thing I think is great about the MC80 Liberty style is that you can drop it on the outside pointing in. And that's exactly what an MC80 wants to do. And that's exactly what your opponent's going to try to stop you from doing is, you know, your MC80 is going to be coming this way. Your opponent's going to try to get around on the sides so that that front arc, because they're all about the front arc, right? And they have a great, phenomenally good front arc. They're all about that. So your opponent's going to try to stop them from doing that. But if you can drop it whenever you want, especially if you give it gunnery teams. So I'll go ahead and outfit one. Let's give it gunnery teams. Let's give it spinal armament, XI7. Now we've got a Star Destroyer Hunter right there, right? Potentially. I mean, you know, anything. Just a really strong ship. Now, and you know what? Let's also give him leading shots too, or even you know what? I already gave him. Let's change it up. Let's give him heavy ions too, for the heck of it. Not necessarily the best, but you could do, honestly, leading shots is pretty good too. You can go with either or, but either way, yeah, you can put your own ion cannon in there. But this MC80 here, you can potentially drop this, you know, the side. You can flank. You can maybe be able to drop it to where it's, oh, and now I can shoot the rear, you know, the weaker sides of your ships. But just you're going to be able to deploy it safely on the flank and point in, and you are probably not going to have to worry about, you know, about lining up that front arc on this guy nearly as much. Granted, it's you know, it's got a good size front arc, so it's, you know, it's not like the hardest thing to point at somebody. But if you're going up against a very maneuverable fleet, you're likely to have some trouble with faster ships potentially going around you. It's one of the reasons why Maydeen is so nice, like I talked about in my Maydeen video with the MC80 Liberty. It's because he really helps them because they're not super maneuverable. But in this case, now you've taken that out of the game because you've put him up on the flank and you've just put him exactly where he wants to be with everybody in his cone, and now you can just destroy. So very fun with the MC80. And the third and final current big ship of the Rebels, which Raddus works really well with, is the one that he was designed with, the MC75. There are a couple of different ways to run the MC75. First, I'm going to talk about, let's talk about the MC75 Armored Cruiser first. The Armored Cruiser, because these two, I think there's different ways to run these, and of course they can both be run the same way, but I think they each shine with slightly different builds. So I'm going to show you two different ways to potentially outfit one of these to work with Raddus. And the first is probably going to be the most obvious, and that's with the Profundity. And it's the idea here is that this MC75 comes in, and then now it can't be the first ship to activate, and this works really nice if you are first player. But the ship that Profundity is a mini version of Raddus. So again, you have to set somebody else. It's the Russian nesting doll. You're going to have another ship within the Profundity. It has to be a small ship, and it has to be a one command ship. So you know you can put like a CR90 in there or a Hammerhead. A lot of people will put Hammerhead torpedo frigates in there, and then you can drop your Hammerhead torpedo frigate distance 1. That one can activate first, and sometimes people will put something like external racks on that Hammerhead frigate. And sometimes people will even put Garell's Honor on that Hammerhead frigate. Now here is a Hammerhead that can attack from its front arc and maybe double arc if you position, because you can position it however you want. So you can get front black, red, and blue, and then you can get a side black, black, and black if you spend external racks, or depending, you know, or however you like it, depending on how the dice fall, and then move and ram and do a whole bunch of damage for a 43-point ship. You can really wreck some stuff. And then after that, you also have the MC75 that can activate next and maybe play cleanup on whatever that little Hammerhead did not kill, because it's probably going to die. That's why external racks is good for that. I'm going to show you another option that I like, and that is, I don't really have too many options where I'm using a CR90, but you can also do a GR75. And the GR75, while not always the greatest thing to drop right in the face of your enemy, but it can survive because it's got the scatter. If you activate the GR75 and you put rapid launch bays on there, well, now all of a sudden you're doing a lot of nesting, because you can now put a couple of squadrons, and maybe we'll add a couple of B-wings into the mix, And so the GR75 has two B-wings inside of it, or attached to it. Maybe they, gripped onto the hull or whatever. They launch the B-wings, they deploy the B-wings at distance 1. And oh, by the way, we give that GR75 Bomber Command Center, right? And so now, and you know what, let's also give them Tor and Far as well, and Bright Hope, so it's harder to kill. All right, let's make it a really beefed up GR75. Drops two B-wings, deploys them, activates them at range 1. They got all the rerolls in the world they want. They got the Tor and Far for their blue die, Bomber Command for their black die. You're gonna roll like maybe probably 3-6 damage at close range from the B-wings. Amazing. And you can even upgrade that to the more expensive GR75 if you want to have it shoot as well. You can do that. I probably wouldn't load it up quite this heavy. I think Bomber Command Center and Rapid Launch Base is enough, because this thing is probably going to get bumped and killed. So that's fine. So we've got that going on. GR75, really, really nasty. Rapid Launch Base is also particularly good because you can also put it on your MC75. So you can have both of these ships dropping squadrons and activating, and just putting squadrons where your opponent doesn't want them to. It's just nuts. It's just really, really nice. And even if your opponent has, a lot of squadrons, because you get to choose not only where your profundity goes, but then you also get to choose where your GR75 goes, and then you get to choose where the squadrons go. You can easily position those in a place that they're not engaged with other squadrons, and you can totally position them however you need to go. All right, so that's being said, next up is the MC75 Ordnance Cruiser. This one I'm going to outfit a little differently as an alternative way to potentially do Raddus, and this one is more risky, and this is the Squadron Hunter MC75, and he's multi-purpose because he's still obviously a ship like this is going to work against everything. And the MC75 is good because it is so diverse. It's one of the most diverse ships I've ever seen. It's got every color dice available. It's good at close range. It also works at long range. It's very survivable. It's got a lot of different upgrade cards. You can outfit it however you want. It can be a carrier. It can be a gunship. It can be, a ramming ship. It's just a lot, and it's large, so it's eligible for a lot of those large ship upgrades, like your strategic advisor. Although I wouldn't necessarily put strategic advisor on a ship that starts out off the board, because you kind of want to use strategic advisor earlier to see where your opponent's moving. But I just love that it's a large ship. So one of the things I might do for the MC75, if it's Ordnance Cruiser, take advantage of those double ordnance upgrades. Now, let's keep in mind, we've only got one black die in our, on our anti-squadron battery, whereas the Armored Cruiser has two. So Armored Cruiser might seem like a better Squadron Hunter platform, but the MC75 Ordnance Cruiser is going to be a little bit better because of some of the ways that we can outfit it here, especially with the double ordnance. First thing we're going to do, Ordnance Pods, okay? So Ordnance Pods is going to let us attack a whole second time. So huge, very, very good card. Next thing is I'm going to put Flechette torpedoes on there, and that is going to let us to, for those squadrons that we can maybe hurt but not kill. Well, now we can just shut them down. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you've got the 8 health, and not your decimator. Oh, I couldn't. Or you know what? I'll just toggle your decimator so it doesn't get to go. I'm not gonna kill it right now, but I can shut it down. And then maybe if I attack again with ordnance pods, then I can do some damage to it. So that's nasty. And let's also go ahead and put ordnance experts on here, because let's re-roll those black dice. I mean, if we're spending the whole time just trying to roll black dice, well, let's totally do that. And there's some, we could do a couple of, I don't know if we really need to put any officers on here. Maybe General Draven. This way we have, attacking a squadron with counter or intel, add a die of any color. You can add an extra black die that way. It's something. It's not always going to work, but it's only 3 points, right? Granted, the officer slot's really contested. It could be tough, but I think that's a cool one, especially here, because you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, because you have ordnance pods that can attack again, and then your regular attack, you got that black die. You have to be close, and that's the thing. You have to be close, but you're getting to place it wherever you want. And since squadrons can, stop you from placing in the ideal spot, here is an option where you're like, well, okay, fine, I'll go right next to your squadrons and I'll attack all of them, shut them down, ordnance pods, extra dice, kill everybody. And the reason that this is okay is because if your opponent doesn't bring a whole lot of squadrons, well, that's good too, because now I'll just drop him right in front of your ships. Double arc pointed at at your ships, and now I've got black dice from my front, black dice from my side, and ordnance experts. I have some cards that are going to waste, but it's a great insurance policy for a ship that can be multi-purposed. Ideally, if you knew your opponent wasn't going to have squadrons, you'd probably spend those ordnance on other things. And and if you feel like you want to change it up just a little bit, you could potentially swap one, like maybe drop flechette torpedoes and swap that out for external racks. All right, and that's another option. Now external racks can be used against a squadron or used against a ship. Even if it's only a one shot, it's a little cheap. It's it's multi-purpose. Works with ordnance experts too. You got some other options there. Of course, external racks I wouldn't use against somebody who has a scatter, but it'd be really good against those high health squadron, or it'd be good against like an X-wing or something like that that's really messing your day up. That maybe flew into all those B-wings you dropped or something like that. You could do something like that as well. And you could even drop this MC, or you could even give this same MC75 Ordnance Cruiser, you could even give them Profundity also, if you really wanted to. Another thing you can do here is you can use Aspiration. Since you are potentially deploying at close range of an enemy ship, or put all the shields that are pointing towards that enemy ship maxed out to just kind of help you stay alive just a little bit longer. You can definitely make sure your rear is pointed completely away from the fighting. That's another option as well. Raddus is just so much fun, and I think one of the things that he is going to give, like we've talked about all these different options, you can run, another thing that's worth considering is you could run 2 of these big ships. Maybe you're going to run an MC75 and an MC80 Liberty, and you're going to have Raddus flying around on a little CR90 or something like that. And depending on the fleet that you face, in this case I want to drop the MC75 because I want to be in close range to you because you don't have any black dice ships. Oh, you're black dice heavy. Oh, okay, no problem. Well, now I'll set my Liberty aside and then deploy him in just the right way. So you can actually make decisions after looking at your opponent's list. If you're going to a tournament or something like that, Raddus could be fun for that because he's going to make all your games different as well because you can use him in different ways. Or honestly, if you start out maybe close to each other, you end up with like ambush zone or something like that. You can just use Raddus to just delay your deployment. Even if you're not feeling good about any of the deployments and any of the options that you're going to have with Raddus, then just deploy him last, or like at the end. Do it at the beginning of the first turn. After your opponent has deployed all of their stuff, you'll be like, oh well, now I'll use Raddus at the start of the first turn. It kind of gives you the final deployment. So in a way, it's a little bit like how Solar Corona or something like that works, where your opponent has to deploy everything first. Well, if you've got everything nested inside your little Russian doll, you can have like one ship on this side of the board, one ship on this side of the board, and we're like, oh, you're all over here? Okay, well now I'll deploy everything up here at the start of the first turn so that I can pincer you, something like that. Even if you don't want to take the risk of dropping somebody at close range of your opponent, you can still just do it when you're outside of engagement range and just line up for a better next turn where you're not bound by that whole restriction of not being able to activate a certain ship first. So a lot of options with Raddus. I probably missed some options too. There's a million and one ways to potentially outfit these ships. I just wanted to talk about some of my favorite ways. But I do think that you probably need to be using the bigger ships. I mean, you could probably make an argument for an MC30 or something like that. But I just think that there's better commander options. Even with the awesome MC30, I think there's better commander options like Mon Mothma, or even Aaron Kraken. So I think there's better commander options than Raddus. Spending 26 points just to take a ship that's already speed 4 that could get in there anyway, But let me know if you disagree. Don't forget to enter that giveaway. If you like this video, guys, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you been using Raddus at all yet? What do you think of him? Are you having fun with Raddus? I'd love to hear about it. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and big thanks to my patrons on Patreon. Also, Keyforge just launched. Are you playing Keyforge at all? Very, very fun game. Definitely like that. Very, very cheap cost to get into. Huge enjoyment out of that. All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.